December 17th, 1903. The place was Kitty Hawk. Something new was happening in the sky above North Carolina. Humans at last found a way to join the birds. It was the first time ever a machine carrying a man powered itself successfully through the air. The story of Wilbur and Orville Wright is a story about those who inspired, those who touched their lives, and those who aided the Wright brothers before, during, and after their dream came to life. These experiences forged who the brothers would become. What Wilbur and Orville Wright achieved would both open up the skies and shrink the planet. It would change civilization permanently. The Wright brothers solved many problems before they first flew at Kitty Hawk on a windy December day in 1903. Thanks to their glider experiments, the Wrights knew they could control an aircraft in sustained flight, but they lacked a power source strong enough to propel the aircraft and light enough to carry it into the air. The engine that solved that last problem lifted the idea of sustained, controlled, and powered heavier-than-air flight from a dream to a reality. 3 men were involved in the invention and development of the first powered airplane. That's right, 3. Everyone knows about the Wright brothers, but that third man was Charles E. Charlie Taylor, a quiet genius who loved cigars and the sound of machinery. Although he contributed to one of man's greatest achievements, powered flight, his name was almost lost in aviation history. And if it had not been for Charlie, that first powered airplane would never have gotten off the ground. Charlie Taylor was born on a little farm in Cerro Gordo, Illinois, on May 24, 1868. From an early age, it was apparent that Charlie was mechanically inclined, and at the age of 12, he left school and began working with machinery in a bookbinding company where mechanics came easy for him. In 1896, Charlie moved his family to Dayton, Ohio, where Charlie worked for Stoddard Manufacturing that made farm equipment and later bicycles. It was in Dayton where Charlie met the Wrights. Mrs. Taylor's uncle rented the building on West 3rd Street to the Wright brothers for their bicycle business. This was a convenient connection because in 1898, when Charlie started his own machine shop, Orville and Wilbur often brought him special jobs from their own bicycle shop. Charlie started to work for the Wright brothers on June 15, 1901, doing routine repairs on bicycles. This let the Wright brothers pursue their experiments with gliders, which included many trips to Kitty Hawk. After one of these trips, the brothers decided they needed more accurate information than was currently available and decided to build a small wind tunnel that would use delicate force balances. This tool would enable them to accurately measure the amount and direction of air pressures on plane and curved surfaces when they were operated at various angles. The Wrights believed this would help them improve their theories based on their glider experiences. Building the wind tunnel was the first job that Charlie Taylor did for the Wright brothers that had any connection with aeronautics. The wind tunnel was a rectangular box with a fan at one end driven by a natural gas engine. The Wright brothers did many experiments in this wind tunnel, and from this data they began to build their 1902 glider. On October 31st, 1902, the Wrights returned to Dayton to make plans for a powered airplane. Through their experiments, the Wrights were able to accurately predict the horsepower required to produce and achieve powered flight. They sent detailed specs to 10 companies for an engine that would produce 8 horsepower and weigh no more than 200 pounds. Within a month, all 10 companies wrote back to say, "It can't be done." So Charles Taylor, the mechanic the Wrights hired to help them in their bicycle shop, set out to create that impossible engine. Years later, Charlie Taylor would tell a reporter,
"I started on repairing bicycles back in in the 80s. And then I later went to Dayton and built bicycles for the Stoddard Manufacturing Company. And they were just starting up in the bicycle business. Then I got acquainted with the Wrights, and I built bicycles for them. I did all the repair work while they went down Kitty Hawk to try out their gliders. Well, and all they needed was power to keep on flying. Why, then when we designed the motor, I made all the different parts in the motor. I even made the crankshaft. So I made it out of a solid block of steel, about 32 inches long, 6 inches wide, and 1.5 inches thick. Cut it right out of the solid block by drilling holes and knocking out large pieces out of it, and then turning it up in the lathe. The motor itself, from the time I started, well, I had it ready for test, was 6 weeks.
Using his craftsmanship, genius, and enthusiasm, Charlie started building the engine in the winter of 1902-1903. Completing the engine in 6 weeks was an amazing accomplishment, considering he was using only a drill press, a lathe, both of which were run by a natural gas engine, and hand tools. The engine was completed and assembled in February of 1903. Charles E. Taylor had successfully built the first aircraft engine. In addition, let us not forget that Charlie also crafted many of the metal fittings and attachments for the Flyer. On September 23, 1903, the Wright brothers left Dayton for Kitty Hawk to set up for their first powered flight. The conditions at Kitty Hawk on the morning of December 17, 1903 were perfect for flight. High, consistent winds blowing from the north. At about 10:30 a.m., Orville Wright laid down on the Flyer's wing surface and brought its engine to life in preparation of launching it and himself into history. After a run of about 40 feet, the machine lifted from the truck just as it was entering on the fourth rail. The first successful powered aircraft lifted off and flew 120 feet at an altitude of about 40 feet for 12 seconds. A new era of transportation was born. By October 1905, the Wrights had succeeded in transforming their marginal success of 1903 into the reality of a practical airplane, capable of remaining aloft for a significant length of time and maneuvering completely under the control of the pilot. Charles E. Taylor built the first wind tunnel for aeronautics, designed with the Wrights, and built the first aircraft engine. Orville Wright designed and Charlie Taylor constructed the first upright four-cylinder engine of the sort that would power Wright aircraft over the next several years. And Charlie was the first person to investigate a powered fatal accident flight. On September 17, 1908, Charlie was slated to fly with Orville. But before the flight, larger propellers were installed to compensate for the heavier weight of the two men. At the last minute, Charlie was replaced by Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, a 20-year-old West Point graduate from San Francisco. During the flight, Orville heard a strange noise. He looked around but did not see anything. However, he decided to shut the engine down and land. Suddenly, there were two large thumps, and the aircraft shook violently as Orville tried to control the aircraft to the ground. At about 20 feet from the ground, the aircraft started to correct itself, but it was too late. The aircraft hit the ground, killing Lieutenant Selfridge and badly injuring Orville Wright. Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge became the first passenger casualty in a powered airplane. After the accident, Charlie investigated the crash scene and found the new propellers that they had put on before flight had delaminated. Charlie Taylor became the leading mechanic in the Wright Company after it was formed in 1909, and he remained there until 1920. He moved to California, lost touch with the Wrights, and his contribution to aviation was forgotten until 1936. Henry Ford was wanting to move and reconstruct the Wrights family home and the old Wrights bicycle shop to Ford's Dearborn, Michigan Heritage Village about great Americans, and he was searching the country for Charles Taylor. Ford's detectives located Charlie working at North American Aviation in Los Angeles, where none of his co-workers realized he had built the first aircraft engine. Ford brought Charlie back to Dayton so that he and Orville could help in the planning, moving, and restoration of the buildings. Charlie worked for Ford until 1941, when he returned to California and worked 60 hours a week in a defense factory. However, in 1945, Charlie suffered a heart attack and was never able to work again. Charlie died on January 30th, 1956, at the age of 88. Charles E. Taylor was the last of the three men that shrunk the world by building the first successful powered airplane, the mechanic who made flight possible. The Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award is the most prestigious award the FAA issues to persons certificated under Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 65. This award recognizes individuals who have exhibited professionalism, skill, and aviation expertise for at least 50 years in the aircraft maintenance profession as master mechanics. The candidate must meet the following criteria to be eligible for the Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award. They must be a U.S. citizen. They must have worked for a period of 50 years in an aviation maintenance career. The applicant must have been an FAA certificated mechanic or repairman working on unregistered aircraft maintained under the Federal Aviation Regulations for a minimum of 30 of the 50 years required. The remaining 20 years may be accepted if that individual served as an aircraft mechanic, repairman in the United States military, or worked as an uncertificated person in a U.S. aviation maintenance facility that maintained U.S. registered aircraft, or worked as an uncertificated person in the aircraft manufacturing industry in the United States, producing U.S. type certificated or U.S. military aircraft. They must have 3 letters of recommendation from their peers. Any individual who has had his or her FAA mechanic certificate, FAA repairman certificate, FAA designated mechanic examiner certificate, or FAA inspection authorization revoked by the FAA is ineligible. The recipient will receive the official FAA Blue Ribbon package that is a complete history of the airman's achievements as documented by the FAA in Oklahoma City. It is a certified true copy of every document on file with the FAA. The recipient will receive a lapel pin, issued after application review and eligibility requirements have been met. Upon request, a stick pin similar in design to the lapel pin is also provided to the award recipient's spouse in recognition of his or her support to the recipient's aviation maintenance career. Once the award has been issued, the recipient's name, city, and state will be added to a published Roll of Honor located on the web at faasafety.gov. The recipient will receive a distinctive certificate mounted on a presentation plaque and signed by the FAA administrator. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure we introduce to you and take a brief look at the life of our newest Charles Taylor Master Mechanic recipient.